So welcome to the Technology Career Acceleration Summit. This is actually the second event of this nature that we're hosting. We held one in November and it went really well. And we decided, you know what, we got to do this again. It's always exciting for us to bring in different minds and experts from tech. And that's really what School 16 is all about. I'm sharing some slides here with you all that you can see, but basically School 16 is about creating pathways and building skills to land opportunities, specifically non-technical opportunities in tech. For Sergey and I, our whole lives, our whole careers, when we were in college up until now, you know, I'm a professor at NYU, we always learned best from practitioners, from people that are in the field, that are actually doing the work that we all aspire to do. Same goes for different roles within startups, functional roles, strategic roles, and even entrepreneurial endeavors as well. And we have three incredible panelists here today. They're going to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes here, but Sarah Manley, Misha Margetich, and Lucia Liu, representing amazing brands. And we'll get into all that stuff in a couple of minutes here. But here is the agenda for today. You're going to hear from us for another 5 minutes, or 3 minutes, I should say, and then we promise to stop talking. In the first part of the event, the first 30 to 40 minutes will be a panel discussion moderated by Sergey and myself. We have some questions prepared for the panelists to dive into their experience and how they were able to develop their incredible careers and how they're thinking about their futures. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to meet with them. You know, this is how we're meeting these days, as Sergey mentioned before. This is essentially our opportunity to network. That's why we're so thankful for the folks that already chimed in the chat. It's also why, again, I will repeat this. I encourage you all, if you're able to do so. I understand that sometimes, you know, there's weird background stuff going on, or you're living with other folks and whatnot. So if you can't turn on your video, no problem, all good. We get it. It's Zoom life. But if you can, then we do encourage you to turn on your video, because, you know, we get an opportunity to put some faces to the names that we see here in the Zoom. And when we are in the breakout sessions in the second half of the event, you will get to the opportunity to ask questions directly of the panelists. And so the way that it'll work is super straightforward. We're going to have 3 breakout rooms that you will be put in, and you will have the opportunity to meet each of the panelists. But don't worry, you don't have to worry about moving from one breakout room to the other. We're going to move the panelists around from one room to the other. So it'll be about 15 minutes per room. It's gonna be super straightforward and really easy, so don't worry about it at all. And also, we want to thank our team here. We have Graham, Gerald, and Kristen, who are helping facilitate this event. Kristen just waved to you all, and all of our names on the School 16 team, we have our name and then in parentheses School 16. So if you need to send a direct message to one of us or something like that throughout the event, feel free to do so.
And I want to also tell you all just really briefly why we started School 16. Vadim and I actually launched this organization early last year, around May. We hosted our first event in April, and we became an organization in May. And the reason is because we have been working with young professionals for the better part of the last 5 years. And what we started seeing is that pathways into tech careers and actually going into a leadership trajectory in tech careers, it's not clear necessarily. In fact, most people that get into tech roles, especially when it comes to non-technical tech roles, which is really what we focus on here at School 16, they don't have linear career paths, and you're going to learn that from today's conversations. And so that's why we started this organization. And I did want to mention before we start the summit here and we start with our panel that we are recruiting for our 4th cohort for our Technology Career Acceleration Program that teaches skills around the non-technical roles in tech, specifically operations, product, sales, and marketing. So for folks in the room here that want to get real-world experience and learn from instructors that are actually in these roles, running these teams right now, pick up those skills and actually also learn how to get into these types of careers and get help, direct help from our team doing so. We're recruiting from that program right now. We have an early application deadline on February 15th, and we are mentioning it today specifically in this event because we do have scholarships available for anybody that needs them, but we prioritize them for early applicants because we obviously can't give scholarships to everyone. So I wanted to mention it to you guys here because you're the first ones in this event that are here, and you have an opportunity to apply for an early deadline. So that's at school16.co/program, and we're going to share that link also at the end of the event again.
All right. So I will stop sharing the screen right now, and we will move on to our first question of the panelist. And we are sticking right on time, Sergey. I think we're doing pretty well. So the first question is actually really straightforward, and we will start with you, Misha. So actually, we're going to go through all three of you. We just want to hear a little bit of an elevator pitch about your career, right? So we'll dig into the details throughout the conversation, but if you can spend 1 to 2 minutes talking about who you are and how you progressed in your career to give a little bit of an insight and intro to the folks that are in the room. So we'll start with you, Misha. Welcome.
Yeah, great. I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. So my name is Misha Margetich. I'm currently with a company called DemoStack that I'm sure no one has ever heard of because we are a stealth mode company still. So I'm going on week 3 there now to build out their customer success team. I'm their first customer facing hire. I'm sure we can talk more about what it's been like starting in a super small company. But prior to DemoStack, I spent just over 4 years at Slack. I was one of the first customer success hires there. So I went through the IPO and then the acquisition of Salesforce, which is interesting. Prior to joining Slack, I spent time at Google and Salesforce and in various customer facing roles. So some of them more focused on customer success and some of them actually more focused on the sales side.
Awesome. Thank you. And by the way, folks, we do record all of our sessions as we are recording this one right now. So if you do want access to the full 1-hour event we held with Misha a couple of months back, do email us after the event or just go to school16.co/events and request that recording, and you can hear the whole story there as well. All right, next we'll go to Lucia.
Hey everyone, I'm Lucia Liu, like the island, St. Lucia, and recently I what we call a boomerang. I boomeranged back to American Express. So I started out my career at American Express as actually a intern, as like a junior out of college. I joined their internship program, and then since then I was at Amex for about 4 years. I think something that really resonated with me in what Vadim and Sergey have said is that, this kind of career is not very linear, right? There's a lot of zigs and there's a lot of zags. And I think, I don't think I'm a good role model in terms of how to zig and zag, but from a background perspective, like I left Amex to start my own chocolate business. And then from there went on to join multiple startups in a chief of staff and business development role in various in various industries, from like travel to food to real estate to mortgage to fintech, blockchain, AI and machine learning, right? So been with a lot of different startups, mostly in the Series A range. So going from a large company to a very small company, and then now going back to Amex in American Express Digital Labs, where we incubate ideas and partner with both large companies and startups to produce products that hopefully help the future of payments.
Awesome. Yeah, you've definitely had a really cool career, and you nailed it. I mean, careers are not linear. That's why we're all here, and it's time that we don't have to think about it in those ways, because I think it creates a lot of unnecessary pressure for folks to have every single step figured out ahead of time, which is near impossible in today's age. Thank you, Lucia. All right, up next we have Sarah, and actually a small fun fact, Sarah and I used to work together back when we were both earlier on in our career. So I got to see you progress through your career relatively early on, and obviously now you're a PM at WebMD, but I'll let you tell the story yourself, Sarah.
Yeah,
Welcome.
absolutely, Vadim. And yes, it's great to be here. I'm happy that we were able to reconvene in this way. It's cool. So I started off in the technology world, by kind of realizing at the end of college that I had learned about the environment. I had learned about social business. I kind of knew the worldview that I had about what matters. I had passions, or I had purposes that I was interested in furthering, but I kind of realized I didn't have a skill set that was going to allow me to be an important person in companies that were doing cool things. So I realized, I kind of came upon, it was during the, the web development, learn how to code craze, and I thought, that will give me something that is useful and valuable to these types of companies that I would like to work at. So because they don't
you can't just care for a living, you have to do something. So I decided to, pursue, I convinced an internship. I went to Northeastern where they emphasize a lot about professional development. So I did a co-op and I basically convinced my boss to let me do some minor web development stuff because I said, look, I got to test out if I actually like the idea of coding or actually doing it. So I initially, I convinced them to let me do some admin stuff. I realized I liked it and I crunched in the rest of my college stuff. I graduated early and I did the web development immersive program at General Assembly in Boston. I was their 4th cohort group, and I was actually one of the younger people in my class because it's designed often around career changers. And I kind of was more of like closer to like a major changer than a career changer, but it was great. So I did the 3-month program and I was looking for jobs and development work. And I ended up in a hybrid role at Waywire, actually, where they wanted someone to work with developers, but not necessarily write code all day. And so about 6 months in, I was, researching on the internet as I usually do, trying to figure out how am I going to be good at this job. And I was like, I'm doing product management. And so I formalized the role and I stayed at Waywire for about 2 years and developed their product management kind of capacity. I ended up building a small team of 2 folks, and I was in this weird role owning all of their client integrations and client relations, being there to help pitch clients at the front end and do custom data integrations on the one side, but then also working with the development team and helping them come up with the notion of a roadmap. And they were very immature on the product management spectrum. And so then my next company, I went to another small startup, again, sole product manager, working directly with the CEO and the heads of the departments to help them be their first product hire. And I ended up formalizing their product process, helping to shape how they do things there. And, I've kind of done things, I'll echo what Lucia said about zigging and zagging kind of the wrong way. So I was alone as a product person teaching myself in for both of my first 2 roles. And so that was really the first 4 years of me doing product. And I helped them successfully exit to their biggest competitor for a really, really great valuation, and said, okay, have fun, you guys are out of here. And then I ended up at WebMD. And so now at WebMD, I work and I own both of the directory products that they offer. I've stayed in the product management world, but my roles and the businesses that I've been in, both my first 2 roles were solidly B2B, and now I'm in the B2B2C space, bringing my expertise. Part of why they brought me on, it's a directory product. I'm used to working in complex data sets, large volumes of data, and connecting many data sources to be kind of like a marketplace. So I was able to build on that background that I had and the technical background that I had to help bring that and bridge. Now I'm on more of the consumer side. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, one quick lesson from that or takeaway that Sarah and I truly do believe in is for folks that want to make inroads into great brands, for folks that want to establish themselves eventually in those brands, just because you don't get that job out of college or grad school or whatever it is, doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to develop those skills. Meanwhile, at smaller organizations, at startups, for example, where you actually end up learning oftentimes a lot more, especially if the startup is growing, but certainly even if the startup is not doing well, right? You will learn how to do it in times of war. So clearly this is an exact example of that.
Yep. So speaking of that, and the fact that you kind of go through your career, even though like everyone on this call, all the panelists on this call are quite young, you all have had a lot of those zigzags and worked at a lot of different organizations. So let me go to you first, Lucia. And if you can think back in your decision-making process as you were graduating college and thinking about the first job that you're going to take, how did you make that decision as far as the kind of company you were going to work for and the kind of role that you wanted to have? And in hindsight, how important or not important was that decision that you made back then?
Yeah, I think that's a really deep question because so in undergrad, I went to Penn, and I don't know for the folks on this call, if you go to a school that is very like pre-professional, Penn was very pre-professional. A lot of my friends were in Wharton, which is like the undergraduate business school. And so they basically had 2 paths, right? Like if you go to Penn, there's like 2 exit strategies for Penn. Like you either, or maybe like a few more than 2, but if you're not like going into academics or medicine or law, then you end up going into either consulting or finance. Like those are kind of the 2 sort of main exits that everybody wants to go to. So either you were interviewing for a consulting job or you were interviewing for a finance job. And I think there's something to be said about the rat race of being in school and like comparing yourself to your classmates, right? Like a lot of my friends who didn't want to be in finance ended up in finance because that's what everybody else was doing. A lot of my, like personally, I myself, like I was a marketing and communications major, and I was really interested in being a consultant because they really sold it to you at school, right? They were like, oh, you get to like advise CEOs and you get to work on big strategies, and it's the sexy job where you like fly everywhere and it can be very international and you live out of your suitcase and you live at like 5-star hotels and everything. And it they really sell it to you, right? And so when I was an undergrad, I thought, okay, that is the direction that I want to go. And I interviewed for a ton of consulting jobs and I bombed them. Like I did very, very poorly on the consulting jobs. And so I think it like, I did really poorly there, but I also got a few on-campus like interviews for marketing roles, right? So I think I interviewed for Macy's and I interviewed for American Express, and those actually turned out much better, surprisingly. And you know, for undergrad, like I was in organizations for like, you know, either cultural clubs or student government or like pre-professional organizations, and most of my roles in those organizations was in marketing. And so it kind of was natural that like I ended up in a marketing job at American Express. And I think the thinking there was like, I didn't want to be here. I was like, okay, maybe I could just like, you know, hang out at American Express for a few years and then try to switch into a consulting job, right? Like I think as someone who's young and who doesn't quite know about like the world as much, and when you're kind of looking at your peers and that's all they're doing, like you can get stuck into a very like an angle where you're like, this is what I want and I'm going to try to get there and this is what I want. And then when you get there, you're like, I don't know if this is actually what I want, right? And it's so ironic because I've always wanted to be a consultant. And for the last 2 years, I've actually been consulting for startups. And I'm like, I don't like that lifestyle, right? So and now I'm back at American Express. And so I think to answer your question around like, how do you think about your career path and like, how do you even decide where you want to go? I mean, obviously there's like the big sexy companies that everybody wants to go to, right? Like Apple and Google and Facebook. I don't know if Facebook's sexy anymore, but like there's these companies that everybody wants to go to, right? And you're so set on like, these are like, this is the company that I want to be at, that you kind of forget like, what is it that you personally want? What are the skills that you personally want to use and want to build, right? Like, do you like, are you a people person versus are you more of a analytical thinker versus like, you know, are you more of like somebody who enjoys managing projects, right? And those are the things that you need to ask yourself before jumping in blindly and thinking, this is what I want to do because this is the sexy thing and this is where everybody else is going.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And sometimes you do have to, in some way, jump in to really get that experience and realize, oh, I don't like this at all. Or the day-to-day is not great, kind of like you did with the freelancing side of things when you were doing the contracting. By the way, I've been there as well. I've done freelancing for a while. And at some point, you know, you're juggling a ton of projects, you're constantly context switching, and it's not the easiest thing in the world, even though there is some flexibility that you get with that lifestyle. But I think another thing that you said that's really important is, you know, especially for folks that don't necessarily have a big resume yet as you're approaching, let's say, your first full-time opportunity after college, if you're still in school, think about the skills that you do have. Think about the things that you have spent your time on. And if it has been, you know, part of clubs or other organizations, you've been involved with recruiting speakers or doing marketing and different activities like that, then that is low-hanging fruit that you can leverage into an opportunity. Now, does that mean you can't have reach opportunities that you're going after that allow you to get an entry level? No, you could still pursue those. But if you want to hedge your bets, And if you want to reduce the amount of risk potentially going into the situation, then think about the things that you have already done. Chances are you have spent your time in certain areas that could prove you to be valuable pretty quickly in the job market. So next I want to go to Misha with a similar question, but I know that you started off in Jigsaw, if I remember correctly, as an internship, and then you parlayed that into a full-time role. So can you tell us a little bit about how you convinced them to give you a full-time gig, and then how you think that experience in that first job really set you up for, the opportunities like Google and the other big brand names that you ended up getting into?
Yeah, I mean, I think the internship is the key portion here. Like, I was fortunate enough to get into kind of the tech world without like pursuing it. So I think that I lucked out a little bit there by getting into this world. It's all I've ever known since. But I think the internship was really, really important because they knew me, they knew my work ethic. I knew the people that were making the decision. So I had a bit of an edge over the people that were applying on the website. So, they hired me obviously because I think they saw what I could be fresh out of college doing intern stuff. It's nothing groundbreaking, but I think at the time, she's had a phenomenal career. Her name is Catherine Blackwell. She leads customer success at Oracle. She was the one that hired me, and she's always been a figure that I've really, really admired because she built the team from the ground up, and honestly she invested it in me when she didn't have to. So I think getting that opportunity and then building the relationship is probably what it was. Like, I would love to say that I was just like so good at my job, but I was doing data entry at some point and replying to emails. So, anyone could have done it. But I think it was the relationships that I built that, really allowed me to be offered the full-time job. So Jigsaw was actually acquired by Salesforce, which it's so funny now because like when I was fresh out of college, I was like, oh, so cool. Like, I'm going to work at a bigger company now. And then looking back, I'm like, we got acquired by a phenomenal company that really, I think, was the platform for where I'm at today. I did some zigging and zagging at Salesforce, which allowed me, I think, to just like have a more well-rounded perspective of what the sales and success world really is. Like, I've been at several companies now, and those of you that maybe are interviewing or doing similar roles, it varies from company to company as far as like what the core of the role is. And at Salesforce, I had the opportunity to do like renewals. I had the opportunity to do just customer success stuff. I had the opportunity to do product specialist stuff. So I think that it set me up for my job at Google because I had this, I had carried a quota, quite honestly. Like, that's one thing that I've realized through my journey is that being well-rounded and having perspective is so, so important. Just being, a CSM that has done it for years and years and years and knows everything that I need to know about customer success, I actually think that it's a little bit less valuable than saying, I've done this, but I know what it feels like to carry a number because you can relate to your peers, which are on the sales side of the house. So I think that really set me up for the role at Google because it was an account manager role. So I actually carried a quota. I managed a couple account managers, and I was responsible for really a territory. And then I ended up at Slack after that. So I think, looking back at when I made the move from Google to Slack, I think it was me actually being more intentional about what I wanted. So my time at Jigsaw, Salesforce, and quite honestly, Google, I was like, these are such phenomenal companies. Like, I'm just excited to be there. And it was kind of that like sexy brand. When I went to Slack is because I was looking for something different. And when you're pursuing something and looking for certain things, the way you evaluate and what you're looking for changes. And I say, like, I was a lot more critical around what kind of company I would go to. And honestly, the same thing with joining DemoStack. Like, I was very intentional with the role that I chose. I was interviewing with several companies that were actually kind of far from just the traditional tech world. And I won't get into it now, but I chose DemoStack for a variety of reasons.
That's great. And by the way, folks, you will get an opportunity in the breakouts to learn a little bit more about what the actual roles that you do now are and what these companies are like to work for. But I want to highlight two things that you said, which are really important, I think, to keep in mind. One is what you did early on in your career, which is relationship building. And I think for some folks, when you hear that networking, relationship building, it sounds like this like amorphous thing that like some people are good at, and then the rest of us, maybe we don't know what that actually means in practice. But it's pretty simple, right? It's actually like making sure that you take the time to get to know people and be curious about them and talk to them and actually spend time with them. But it's also, especially when you're earlier on in your career, but certainly throughout, it's also making sure that people notice the work that you do. It's copying somebody that's a boss of a boss so that they see that you did some work. It's making sure that you speak up in meetings and the like. People will notice you if you make yourself noticeable and noticed. So that's really an important part of that relationship building process, so that people can make decisions based on data that they've collected over time about what it's like to work with you. The other thing that I want to mention that you talked about, which is I think one of the coolest things about tech, and especially non-technical roles in tech, is that they are so cross-functional in nature, and the skills from one job are so applicable to another, and oftentimes can even have different names for the same type of job in different companies, where as you learn what you're good at and what you like, you can actually do what Misha did and be a little bit more deliberate about how you craft the narrative around your career to get that next role that you actually really want. So you don't have to worry and stress too much in the early days. Am I doing the right thing? Am I spending the stuff, building the right skills? Because you can develop that later on when you're ready to make those decisions. So thank you so much for that, Misha. That's a great example of that.
And of course, you all are probably having some questions that you're thinking about right now. So hold on to those. Again, we'll go into the breakout and you will have the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask away once we're there relatively soon. So the next question is for you, Sarah. And, I'm going to go back to your time at Waywire because I know intimately how that experience was. And it was definitely not the easiest company to work at for a variety of reasons. But you, as you mentioned earlier, made the decision to get that certification at General Assembly, I guess, as a way probably to become a little bit more technical. I'm curious though, as you got your, first of all, I'm not sure, did you get that certification while you were at Waywire or before?
Oh, before. And I actually was hoping to become a web developer at first. I really thought like, okay, I'm going to do development. And I actually ended up in the Waywire role on accident. They kind of talked me into it and said, look, we know you want to be a developer, but we really need someone. Maybe you'll like it. We know you have some, I had some professional experience from college, from a co-op, we know you have some client-facing experience. Maybe you're, extroverted enough that you can do both, because we need someone who can deal with the developers, but also, translate to us because we can't always talk to them. So it was kind of on accident. It was not on purpose. I was trying to get to development and just landed on accident, discovering something that I actually think is a much better fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a lot of people think that once you get a job, wherever it is, you're going to fit into a neat box. And one of the things you learn really quickly is that usually does not happen, even at massive organizations. And a lot of people are also interested in product management, which is the career that you've been able to get into. So I'm curious, because for me personally, most of what I learned as a product manager at managing software products was learned on the job. The function itself really has been evolving significantly over the last decade or so. But talk about, I guess, maybe whether it's your experience at Waywire or beyond, can you talk about maybe like a specific situation or certain responsibilities that you got earlier on that really helped accelerate your understanding of what it means to be a product manager and your skill set, really position you to be an awesome product manager in the future and grow your career?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I would say, I echo what you're saying. It's very true about product management that the domain or the best practices around this field have continued to mature and evolve. It's really still a budding area. And, a lot of the things that we used to strive for 5 years ago are already considered like, no go, don't do that. So I would say that the other thing I would echo about product management is that for anyone interested in product, the good thing is that most of what it takes to be a great product manager are, like you said, they're not job specific. A lot of the skills that I see in product managers that matter are things that you can learn in another job. You can even start to flex your muscle of product management, good product management principles in a sales job, in a customer service job. You can start where you are and start to flex those muscles. And so some of the things that helped me and that you kind of touched on is one of the biggest parts of being a good product manager, and what I would stress of someone, if you see yourself this way, you could be a great, fit for product, is you have an interdisciplinary mindset. I think Misha mentioned this as well, so I don't think this is exclusive to product, but if you can think about being the glue or having an interdisciplinary mindset around not just one department's point of view, but being able to kind of be the translator. I would say for me, the natural talent that I brought to it was I love kind of being a translator. I love learning actual languages. I love learning coding languages, but my goal was always to be able to translate between the way that, a CEO or a sales rep communicates with the way that a client communicates, with the way that a developer communicates, and wanting to be able to facilitate that. So, one of the biggest distinguishers for me that helped me figure out that I was better off in product than engineering is you notice a lot that product is very multi-threaded. Being a good engineer is oftentimes very single-threaded. That's not always the case, but generally you end up being someone who loves being a generalizing specialist or a specializing generalist who likes to get their hands in a little bit of everything, but doesn't want to have to be responsible in total for anything, right? So it's a role of influence. You have to be doing that. So to get back to your question in terms of things that I learned early on that helped me, communication skills, being able to understand the motivations and needs of various departments, because at first glance, they can tend to seem different, but trying to find the wins that are shared between them to come up with something that's there. Two, I think that the most important thing that I learned was I learned how to learn without guidance. I learned how to be self-directed. And so even though I have a boss now and I'm part of a much larger and complex product organization, it's been a major win for me that I don't require spoon feeding. I don't need someone to give me the skills to go out and learn how to quickly grok and answer questions that I need to do my job today, to do my job next week. It was trial by fire for me for all of Waywire and for all of Redbooks. I didn't have another person in my department who brought a product point of view. So that was probably the most mileage that I got out of any skill. Was I was able to quickly find high quality books, a blog post, and not to learn perfect information, but to learn just enough that I didn't make egregious mistakes and do that kind of 80-20 principle. What's that 20% of something that I can just grab to maybe grab some mental model, some framework that's going to allow me to go into my meeting at 4:00 or to have that presentation in 3 days, that I'm not going to go into it totally blind. I'm going to get just enough of something to get me to the next step so I can still be action oriented, but apply some nugget of something that I'm not, being overly, a blank. I shouldn't be starting from a blank page. So I would say out of everything, that was the skill that I think differentiates me and helped me stay afloat when I was often, in the wilderness, like, how am I doing this job? What am I doing? I have to figure this out as I go. And then the final thing I would say around like product in terms of what you're talking about and the skill building, you can learn a lot about product by bringing a product mindset to analyzing things in the world. So there's a lot that you can do around case studies, looking at a company. You see a lot of case studies about successful companies, but I got a lot of mileage when I was, either looking for jobs or I had time and I was trying to hone my product skills, thinking through scenarios about, hypothetical exercises for how you would critique a product, or I've even done real things where I'll go out and do a customer research project on my own. I came up with a mock product and I got 5 moms who are friends with friends on Facebook, and I practiced my customer interviewing so I could learn. So a lot of things I did were about honing the mindset and the process of product without even having to do it. So I think that's a great one that anyone can take even before they're in a product role.
I think that's absolutely true. And time again, when we talk to product managers, they say that other product managers come from all sorts of walks of life, operational backgrounds, consulting, banking, sales, customer success, account management, what have you. And that is because it is one of those roles where different types of personalities can make it work and can learn and acquire the skills on the job. But it also is, as you mentioned, incredibly cross-functional. I think that's the case actually for most roles in tech, I will say. Product for sure.
I agree.
But yeah, and that's why understanding how other departments work, understanding how engineering works and sales and customer success, if you're going to be a product leader, but even if you're going to be in these other functions, is incredibly important for you to be successful in any technology company.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing, that there's no standard product manager. So you can actually choose, it's a very choose your fighter type of role. You can lean into what you already know. Every company needs different PMs. And so you don't have to worry about the skills that you don't have. That's something that you were saying earlier. You can think about the flavor of PM that you could be today, and then still think about grafting towards, some aspirations in the future.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I want to ask one more question here before we break out into breakout rooms. And the question is for Lucia, which, if you look at your LinkedIn profile and your resume, you do have a lot of entrepreneurial activity there. Maybe that is something you even knew about yourself when you were back in school. And even now you host a podcast called Rock the Boat, which has awesome career stories from Asian Americans who've had non-traditional career paths. So you guys should all subscribe and check that out, Rock the Boat. But my question to you is, how did you navigate that desire to start your own business, to run your own company? You started a confection business. And how did you decide the timing of it? And then when you look through your career trajectory and then actually transitioning back into the professional realm and working for someone else, do you think that actually helped you, or was it hard to navigate those conversations about, you going off and working on your own thing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the shout out for the podcast. I actually met Vadim and Sergey at a podcast meetup, and they were hosting the podcast meetup. And so we are definitely podcast buddies. So thank you for the shout out for that. I think in terms of your question around like navigating and figuring out like when to leave and then when to sort of dive back in, when Amex was the first job that I ever held, and it was really quite interesting being on the insides of like on 165-year-old company, right? Like it's an old company with a lot of set structure. It's very hierarchical. So it was kind of a culture shock going from like school where you're just like, where you're kind of in this like very strategic and like, idealistic mindset, to going to the real world where, Misha mentioned, like you're basically just sometimes just like, filling in spreadsheets all day, or like just like, inputting data. And like it felt like at the time, when you're at this like large company, you can feel kind of lost, right? And so I think something that for me, I was really interested in building skills. Like I was interested in building tangible skills. And so, as an analyst in marketing, the tangible skills that I was able to build was all around like data and analytics and like really knowing how to tell a story with data. And then from there, I jumped over to product marketing or product management. But product management at a large company is very different from product management in like a small startup where you're directly working with engineers. Product marketing, across the organization is very different depending on which division you sit in. And the product management that I did was very much more similar to like product marketing at a traditional tech role. It was basically, taking an understanding of like how the product works and then translating that to client managers and helping those client managers sell that product, right? And so it was interesting to be able to like kind of work on those projects and get into those fields. But at the end of the day, I wasn't executing on any of that, right? It was more so like we had agencies that would, actually develop the marketing campaigns for us. We would write marketing briefs, or like we would do, and in terms of like product management, like we weren't really like, we had third-party white label solutions. And so we were working with a white label partner to deliver any sort of technology. And we had no insight and or control into their product roadmap. And so that's kind of when I really took a step back and realized, wow, if I stayed at this large company, it's going to be really, really slow for me to develop all the skills that I want. It's going to be really, difficult to like fill in that toolkit. And I think something that Sarah mentioned is about like, if you're passionate about being a generalist, or if you have a lot of different interests, then I think getting your hands dirty in a little bit of everything is helpful. And that's kind of what drove me at that point, to really think about what I wanted for my career. And I came across two paths. The first path was I could get an MBA, right, and like kind of start over. I could go back to school and maybe dive into something a little deeper, or I could start my own business and kind of get my hands dirty and like learn from the ground up. And it's really funny because at the time, like people would always say, especially if you're at a big company, it's like, well, if all else fails, you can always go back. Right? Like that's kind of the mantra of like a lot of entrepreneurs who come from large companies. And so that was kind of the thinking where like, okay, you know what, if all else fails, I can always go back. So I took the leap, started my own chocolate business. It was by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do, because I was doing all the production work myself. Like I was actually like producing chocolates and selling them, and like I had to do my own business development work. I had to like operationalize the whole thing. I had to figure out how to ship chocolates. Like this was before shipping became like super easy, and I was doing like, e-commerce at the time when like e-commerce wasn't super like, available, like Shopify wasn't a thing. And so like that experience really gave me a lot of confidence in terms of like being able to like build and get my hands dirty and actually do stuff, right? And like be able to like get stuff done. But from there, I also realized, wow, like I don't have a lot of role models, and I don't have a lot of other peers to look to from like a small business perspective. This was like before the days of WeWork, before the days that it was sexy to be like an entrepreneur, like a startup owner. And so that's when I decided to pivot, and I like decided to just dive in and like try a lot of different things. So I got a real estate license, and I like started consulting for various like companies. Like I consulted for 16 Handles in the food space. I consulted for a real estate company, and it gave me kind of a break from the entrepreneurial world, but gave me insight into like other smaller companies where I was like working hand in hand with the CEO on figuring out strategies or like doing business development work. And from there, I was interested in understanding venture, because I was working with all these small businesses, but none of them were really like venture funded. So I feel like that's kind of a theme in my life, where it's like you dive into something and then you're like, okay, well, what's the sexy thing in this industry? And like the sexy thing in the industry was, venture backed companies. And so I ended up joining a venture backed company as chief of staff. They had just raised $9 million to like, I heard they were supposed to revolutionize Instagram or something, and like, and I like after I joined, that gave me a really good look into like what actually like under the hood of some venture backed companies. And I would say that, maybe some are really great, but the experience that I had was definitely an experience of like, this is how you should not run a company. This is how you should not develop products. And so it was a very good and interesting learning experience for me personally. And I stayed there for a year and left. And subsequently, I think the year after, the company went under. And so it was interesting, but I feel like it helped me develop a lot of the skills and insights into industries that I used to never have any relations with, right? But now I like have a really good understanding of real estate. I have a good understanding of mortgage. I have a really good understanding of like the startup landscape, and that's when it sort of came around where I was like, this could be really beneficial at a larger company where I feel like I've worked with all these smaller companies that don't necessarily have a ton of resources. But at a larger company, there's a lot of resources. And if you're launching something, it could impact a lot more people. And so that's kind of where I made a decision of, hey, I think it's time for me to like go back and look at like companies and organizations with a bigger opportunity. The process was hard, I'm not gonna lie, because it was very hard getting your foot in the door and like kind of explaining to other people a lot of the zigs and the zags in your career, right? Like, I think a lot of HR people will want to see like a certain career trajectory or certain path, right? And they are kind of just looking for a specific template that sort of mirrors the skill sets and things that the hiring manager wants. And I think that's something that's like insight that's a little deeper in terms of like, you know, how hiring actually works. Like being a chief of staff and being on the hiring side, it is very broken. Like it is very broken in terms of like how people actually look at like who to hire, et cetera. So long story short, it was very hard, but I kind of went back to, you know, Amex and really like lighted up all the networks that I still had there and was able to kind of get my foot in the door. And, you know, I was lucky enough that there was an organization within Amex that really fit me, right? And that I felt like I was a fit for, which was in the labs, digital labs division, where they work with startups and they work with, you know, up and coming partners. They're a lot more technologically savvy than the rest of the organization. And so that's kind of where I ended up. And, you know, honestly, I think it really is that adage of like, you know, if all else fails, you can always go back. I feel like I'm a living example.
Nice, good work on that. And I'm sure everyone else on this call, the panelists can relate to that for sure. And boomeranging is becoming more and more of a thing, right? Where folks leave a company and then come back because the recruiting cycles are changing now, and people understand that, you know, good talent is hard to come by. And if somebody decides to leave and they had a great experience at a particular company, they may come back in the future. So that's another reason why, by the way, folks, never ever burn any bridges, regardless of what your experience was like in a particular role, even if it was less than ideal. Okay, thank you for that. So folks, this panel discussion that we had over the last 40 minutes or so was designed to provide you with context and arm you with the awesome questions that you're gonna have as we go into these breakouts. So here's how that's gonna work. In about a minute, you're gonna get a notification on your Zoom screen to join that breakout room that you're gonna be in for the duration of the session. So you're gonna click on Join Breakout, and that's it. You can kind of sit back and relax. And as we're going through these, we're gonna have 15 minutes per speaker, and the speaker is going to be moved to the new breakout so that everybody has an opportunity to meet everybody else. So if you have questions that are specific about these folks' careers and how they navigated them, the skills that are required to be successful in these roles, recruiting, hiring, whatever it is, you will have the floor to do that. Again, and you'll be reminded again in about a minute, please do enable your video if you have the opportunity to do so. Quick refresher, if you need a little bit of additional context, Lucia's title right now is Senior Business Development Manager or Manager of Business Development. Misha is Customer Success, and Sarah is Product. But all these three panelists have had very varied experience, and you can dive into whatever makes sense for you. So right now we're going to go into those three breakouts. I will be in one room. Sergey is going to leave me and go upstairs and be in another room. And then Graham will be in that third room. So we'll see you all in a second.
Awesome. Look at that. We didn't even have to actually move anywhere, and we're back into another room. Awesome. Looks like Vadim is back here. Hey, Vadim.
Hey, Sergey. Apparently it's sunny all of a sudden where you are.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm going to go look through that telescope later. Awesome, folks. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that those breakouts, and I know we had a lot of great questions in ours. I want to give, first of all, a huge thank you to Lucia, Sarah, and Misha for spending the almost 2 hours with us, talking about your careers, answering questions, and really being honest about your trajectories. That's what we want to hear, and we really appreciate you sharing. This experience has been hugely valuable. Even for me, I learn something new every time we do one of these things. So I really appreciate you spending the time with us here. And folks, thank you for coming to this School 16 event. If this is your first time, do keep a lookout. We host events quite regularly. We may have another one in the next couple of weeks, so make sure you're signed up to our newsletter at school16.co. I do want to encourage folks one last time that if you are looking for a little bit more guidance, you want to get more context into some of these roles that we talked about here in product, marketing, sales, operations, then do submit an application to our program that's going to be launching on March 15th. So the deadline for that is February 15th, but get it in early. It just takes about a few minutes to complete. And then the next step is we invite you to an interview to see if you could be a good fit for that. But also Vadim, I think, is dropping a link here for our survey. We read every single response, and it's a very quick survey. It takes about a minute. We read every single one. We love hearing from you, what you liked, what you would like us to improve. We believe in iteratively improving these events for our community. So please take a second to leave that survey on our website. We would really appreciate that from you. Thanks a lot, folks. Team, did I miss anything else, School 16 team?
No, I think you're all set.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you, panelists, for joining us, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye-bye. Awesome. Thank you, guys.